and well met. This is Layron with the Fantasy Grounds Academy. Today I'm going to be talking about NPCs, generating them with a generative AI tool such as ChatGPT. Certainly you can use one of your favorites, but the mileage will vary depending on how complex your prompts are, how much experience you have with AI tools, and also giving it some sort of context or template as to the type of output you're looking for. So that really helps to start off a conversation with ChatGPT with some formatting and some idea of what type of output you want. It's kind of hard to do when you're new because you're not certain as to the output that you're looking for, but in general, you want plain text. You don't want a bunch of bold letters and HTML and markup and strange characters as far as like text goes. So having the correct text formatting for Fantasy Grounds is rather important, especially with NPCs or if you want to import tables, that sort of thing. So without further ado, I'm going to, I have ChatGPT here. This is just a floating window. That's why my cursor disappears behind it. So it's not actually part of Fantasy Grounds. So I've had people ask me, how did you get that browser in Fantasy Grounds? It's not actually in Fantasy Grounds. This is just an overlay, and this is actually a website. So I wanted to make that clear. And also, as a disclaimer, I want to make sure that anyone watching now or in the future, that the Fantasy Grounds Academy is a community of kind of enthusiastic users of the Fantasy Grounds platform. We don't officially represent SmiteWorks. And also, I wanted to know that some of my opinions may or may not agree with you. So if it's something that you don't like or whatnot, just remember that I am an individual with my own opinions, and I base this off my uses. And I'm kind of looking at this more as a user, not as a SmiteWorks developer. So just kind of letting you know that my views don't always agree with yours or with SmiteWorks, but I try to give the people who watch the show a fairly honest opinion. I don't sugarcoat it and pretend like everything's good, because there are a lot of things that are challenging that can take time. And one of the things I've learned over the last 8 to 9 years with Fantasy Grounds is you have to put in some effort. And sometimes people don't want to hear that, and I get it. I mean, it's frustrating sometimes, but really, honestly, if you put in some time, meaning that you use the platform at least a week, or at least once a week, it really does help. So we're going to focus more today on creating NPCs with generative AI tools. So this can apply to any rule set. It doesn't just have to be 5e or Pathfinder. It can be any rule set. The real magic here is the fact that you will need to try to come up with some formatting for the actual platform. So it may be hard to see on the screen. I'm noticing that the actual the look of it and the way that the overlay is, it's kind of how would I say, kind of dim. But this is the Chat GPT window that I'm working on behind the scenes. So basically, in this particular case, we're going to focus on an innkeeper. So those tend to be a starting point, and I think it's very important to have that at least figured out before you start your campaign. It doesn't necessarily have to always be a bar, it can be any starting point. But the thing that you really probably would like to start with, especially if you're like a world builder or if you want a little bit more immersion for your games, is to make sure that that NPC has some stuff available to make your game more smoother and interesting and not so cliche. Now, if it's your first game and you're a new DM and you don't have time for all this stuff, that's fine. I mean, I understand. But if you really want to put some effort into your games and you have time, it would help to have some of these things sorted out before you start playing. And this would be very helpful if you're going to make a whole bunch of NPCs and you add a little bit more detail to them so that they're not so plain or cliche or generic, and it will serve a higher purpose in the long run. However, you may just want a real quick NPC that doesn't require a whole bunch of things. So it depends on the story you're trying to tell and if that NPC or character is going to be a mainstay or something that you keep going back to. So that's kind of what I'm talking about, is a mainstay barkeeper. So someone that's going to be there all the time, someone that you'll go back to at least a few times during and throughout your adventure. Or it could be a quest giver. It could be any sort. It could be a blacksmith, whatever you need it to be. I think generative AI tools make that job a little easier. I know before there was AI tools, it took me a lot longer to do this. I mean, it is probably a little bit more rewarding because you've actually come up with everything on your own. You're using more of your own creativity. But again, if you're trading time for quality, I think AI is a good middle ground between creative and kind of cheating or kind of making things quicker. So it kind of, and then there's people who don't like AI. So, there's that whole discussion as well. But if you are someone who's world building and you really want to get a lot of work done, I think the AI tools will help immensely. Like I was saying before, to give it context is probably the most important thing. So I'm just going to give you an idea of what I was working on before I decided to make this particular video. So I wanted to create a barkeep or an innkeeper or something like that, but what I really thought is that this task can be very time consuming, and you might put a couple hours of work into this and it may not even happen. So in your game you might not even use this. However, if you're going to use Fantasy Grounds with a generative AI tool, it might speed up your process once you get familiar with how things work and where things are. So what I'm going to go over is that I had an NPC stat block template for the 2024 5e rule set. I got this from D&D Beyond, and with that template I gave the actual formatting, the text formatting, the way the text is arranged. And that's really important if you want to take advantage of the 5e stat block importer. Now, this doesn't work for every rule set. I think there's only 1 or 2 rule sets that have an importer, and some of it's third party. So it may not be built into Fantasy Grounds, or might be a tool. I think Savage Worlds has one. I think Pathfinder might, and there's a couple other rule sets that may have a utility. I think someone just did one for Shadow Dark, which is kind of cool. But they're not built in natively to Fantasy Grounds, so I just wanted to make sure you know that up front. So this is the 5e rule set with the 2024 rule books loaded. I actually have some of the base books. When you're doing something like this, you generally don't need a ton of books open. Generally, like the SRD or just the basic rules will do. And the only reason I have them loaded is that in case you have spells or something that you want it to parse or that you want it to recognize, it will pull that in if possible. And right now, as of the 8th of February 2025, we don't actually have the official 5e monster manual, which I'll be taking a look at that in a few weeks. But until then, I can make my own NPCs using the tools that are provided in Fantasy Grounds for the 5e rule set. So what I'm going to do is pull up NPCs. And these are NPCs that are coming from the player's handbook, and I think there's a couple in the Dungeon Master's Guide. They're very basic stuff. You got like an elf, or not an elf, but an elk, draft horse, things like that, real basic stuff. So what I'm going to do is up here, before I create any data, I usually create my own group. And the reason I do that is so that you have separation between all the content here. So if this is something that that you want to differentiate and sort in Fantasy Grounds, this is the best way to do that. So I'm going to take this drop-down list. I'm going to add a category, and I'm just going to click the edit list button, which is like a little pencil in this case. And then this is also going to be titled, I'll just say custom NPCs, and I think I'm going to say AI so I remember the source. So custom AI PCs, that's what I'm going to call this category. And then I'll click on that category once it's made. and that creates a blank slate. So when I'm building things, it'll be in this category. It's not necessary to do that, but if you don't, it will be in all and it won't be sorted or separated, or it'll be uncategorized. So what I would like to just impart is that anytime you make data for yourself, in the long run, it helps to do this. In the short term, probably not a big deal. Maybe you only have one, not a big deal. So this is just a best practice. The other thing I wanted to mention is that I am actually using a, basically I'm just using a blank campaign. So it's not actually a game that I'm playing in or anything like that. I'm trying to make it so that when I am running this content, I'm not building in the same session as I'm playing it. And the reason for that is as time goes on and your campaign grows, you may find that you've created stuff that you want to use in other games. So if you build everything in the same campaign, it's harder to get that content separated out and exported to use in other content. So as a word of advice, if you want to build a lot of content and it's going to be used in other campaigns, you may want to start with a fresh work campaign and work from there and then export everything out to go into your other sessions. So that's kind of the wisdom behind that. So anyways, I'm going to take and add this green plus button down here, which is add item. And this is a stat block with nothing in it. So the traditional way to adjust or create stat blocks is to go and let's say we'll find one. So let's just say I wanted this draft horse, but I wanted to beef it up a little bit and I wanted to use it. So generally speaking, these used to be locked, but I think they've unlocked them recently and you can edit these. But if you want it to be more permanent or more customized, you can make a copy. So if you take the draft horse and make a copy of it, you'll get a duplicate of the NPC. And now it's not attached to any books. And you're not going to edit or alter anything in your session that's going to, change the base, basically. So this is going to be the copy of the draft horse that I want to edit. So if I click this drop-down menu and I take this horse that I made a copy of, I can drag this record into my new category. Even though this isn't a custom AI NPC, I'm just doing this for making it faster. So here's the draft horse. Open that up. You see it's not attached to any books or anything. I'm going to unlock it, and then you can edit to your heart's delight. One thing I've noticed that a lot of people are kind of weirded out by are these modifier save buttons and the initiative. So if you want to modify that, you just mouse over, and I believe you hold the Alt key or Control, and you just mouse up and down. That's all you have to do. So you just make sure that you're hovered over it, and you just hold the Control key and you use the mouse wheel to modify these numbers in here. So there's a lot of people who had confusion on that because the actual stat block highlights, but these cells over here, it doesn't look like you can change them. And in some cases, you'll have to manually change them for one reason or another. So that's something that's kind of new with Fantasy Grounds. And then you have this notes section, which I think is cool. And then the images. So this is the traditional way to do it. If you just want to make something quick, rename it, add things, take things away, that's very helpful. So what I'm going to do is actually import a stat block that I made with ChatGPT. So I want to close this, and I don't need this new personality. I was just showing you the starting point or from scratch. I don't need the horse anymore, so I'll delete that. So what I want to do is click on this hamburger menu, import text. So this is where I'm going to actually bring over the content that I want to make for the NPC. So the first things first is the stat block itself. So I'm copying and pasting this out of ChatGPT, and this is already in a decent format that is going to be recognized by the import parsing tool. So right now you have all these spaces, which is okay. It will do it automatically. It will take those out. But if you want to preview or you want to clean that up, you can right click on the wand, and that'll kind of take out all the extra spaces. So these are the traits, actions, bonus actions, reactions. These are things that you will see on an NPC stat block. And if these are not correctly formatted, then they may not pull in properly. And we'll find out if this is done right. So the real thing that changes a lot in stat blocks, especially if you export or from a PDF, is that this stuff here always varies, and I don't know why, but it does. And then you have to be careful with the import mode. So I want to change this to the 2024 D&D Beyond filter. If you don't have the correct filter, it may not pull that in properly. So that's something you got to be aware of. If you close this import NPC tool and then you bring it back up again, you're going to have to reselect the mode. So leave this open if you're going to do a bunch. I found that out the hard way. So you have that stuff here. And if you wanted to add anything else over here, you could. So what I had done is prompted ChatGPT to basically make the NPC first, and then I added some other stuff. So what I want to do is I got a newer updated barkeep because I wanted to change a few of the stats. I wasn't happy with basically what was going on with how it formatted it, and also I didn't like the scores. So I asked it to update the scores. So here are all the different things here. And this is the formatting you want. And then for the background, or for anything that you want that's not part of the stat block, I'm going to add this background and lore, which contains information about the NPC. So I'm going to put that up here, up on top. So this is basically the background and lore. And I'm going to right click on this to get rid of those extra spaces. And what I'll do is I'll just highlight these. I'll make these bold. And then there we go. So this has just got his appearance, his tactics, background, and lore. You can add a lot of different things. So I asked ChatGPT using this template here to create the table, a rollable list that I can use for lore. And this would be something that you can put into Fantasy Grounds by using the import tool. So again, the rollable table import tool is universal. So this would work with most rule sets. But if you go to tables in your campaign setting area, and again, I'd make a new group. So add category, edit the group name. So I'm going to call this custom tables, just to have a separate category. And you don't have to, but like I said, later on, it'll help for sorting and stuff and organization. And now here's the hamburger menu. So this also has a requirement. So what I want to do is call this, I'm copying and pasting out of the ChatGPT window. So tavern tales and whispers, control copy, control V as in Victor. And then I'm going to take the results and the numeric value and hit copy and paste. And there we go. So this first line here is the row, and then you have these columns, which is separated by this pipe. So that pipe symbol is going to delimitate between the two. And what you want to do is click on delimited, and your delimiter or the separator is going to be a pipe. I don't use colons, semicolons, or commas, especially with sentences, because those will occur quite a bit. And that'll create a whole different row or column. So is the column headers in the first row? Yes. The column header is going to be, the die roll and this result. And then the table ranges in the first column are anything left of this pipe symbol. So that's why I do it this way. I use the pipe. You can use commas or whatever you want. Like some of you might use a spreadsheet and use a CSV. But nonetheless, this is how I got it. Put it in if we're going to use this format and hit import. So there we go. So there's our tavern tales and whispers. So this is something you can use in your campaign. I usually roll to test it, see what the result looks like. This one says the watchful patron. A robed figure has been renting the same private booth in the back corner for the past 3 months. They never speak, never drink, and always leave just before midnight. Tomas thought they were just a quiet observer until he noticed that they never leave by the front door. So this is just kind of like an adventure starter type thing. So what I can do with that is link this to the NPC. So before I even import it, I can link this table to the back of the NPC sheet. And the reason I would do that is so that I have the content ready to go if I was going to be playing in the game. And you can also do this after the fact, so you don't have to do it right now. So once you have everything and you have everything set up, your artwork and everything, then you can get import and we'll see. Yeah, see, this is broken because it said small or medium for size. So we want to just put medium, type humanoid, any alignment. I think everything else looks pretty good. So smooth talker, keen observer, barroom brawl, throw mug, bonus actions, quick pour, reactions. There we go. And here's the notes. So it looks pretty good. So it looks like it's going to be useful for my campaign. And what's nice is that you get this nice summary that brings up the table. So I'm going to go ahead and rename this as Tavern Lore and what was that called again? Let's see. Tavern Tales and Whispers. So that is Tavern Tales Tackles. I'm going to fix that. Okay, so Tavern Tales and Whispers. I'll make that bold, and this will be, I'll label it as a table, and then this will not need to be bold. So this is just so if you are in the middle of a conversation, you have the NPC, you can pull this up. And like I said, if you're going to do a bunch of them, you want to leave this open and just delete the content out. If you're done with it, close it. That way you don't have to worry about the filter below. So I'll go ahead and close that, and then close that, and we'll put the NPC over here. And sorry about blocking that window. I don't know if you can see it anyways, but so there's our NPC. And usually what I'll do is take the NPC record, bring up the combat tracker, and I usually put it on there just to check it out. Make sure that it's parsing correctly and that it looks right. And you won't really know right away what's right or wrong, but eventually you'll start getting used to this format because all this text here is very important when it comes to parsing. If one period is missing or one comma is in the wrong place, and as you saw it, the stat blocks say medium or small to accommodate for the new 2024 rule set, but you only can use one for size. And you can change the alignment at this point if you want. You can add a few hit points. I mean, you can do whatever you need to get this going. And you'll notice down here, it'll say version 2024. So if you're using the older rule set like Legacy, it'll say that down here probably, depending on how you imported it. So if it's an older Legacy stat block, it'll probably just say that down here. So it depends on what we're making and such. And if you have artwork, this would be a time to assign that. I don't have any right now. So for now, it's just a flat token that says B for bartender. And at this point, you can basically change the name if you want. So the other thing is this guy's name is Tomas. So I'm going to say I'm going to put Tomas, comma, Tomas, and then I think in parentheses I'll just put barkeeper. So that's going to be his more formalized name. And then for this notes tab, maybe I'll put the menu back here just for convenience for me. So when I'm running this, maybe I don't want to keep looking for stuff. You know, if I have all this stuff back here, I don't have to jump around and look for it in Fantasy Grounds. So this is the rusty tankard food menu. And this is just some basic goods. And it just gives you a kind of a more of a role-playing aspect. But again, if you're going to use it to sell, buy, sell, and trade in Fantasy Grounds, you're going to have to put it in as items. So you have to build all the items if you want to sell it in Fantasy Grounds. So in this case, this is the rusty tankard food menu. So I'll make that bold. And then here, I can take this text and make that italicized. And then here, I will make bold. And then here's some staple food. These are the daily specials. There's some sweets and treats. So there's side dishes and extras. And what else do we have? Baker's goods. Let's see, there's some supplies and staples. And then Control I for that. So this is just some extra stuff that you can add to your NPC stat block. This is becoming a little bit excessive, but nonetheless, now I have a kind of an idea of the content that's served there. Now, if I want to take it to the next level, I would build all these in Fantasy Grounds as items. So that's your next step. If you wanted to make like a store, you can put all this stuff in as an item, give it a cost. And then if you want to have it deduct automatically from your player's inventory, their coins, you can put a negative value instead of the cost. So you can do -4 silver for the stew of the day. And when you drag the item to the player's inventory, it will deduct that amount. Now, it doesn't stop it from going negative, but at least you don't have to do that transaction manually. The other thing is you could build a store and then have players drag the stuff that they want to buy to their character sheets in their inventory tab. And remember, this is 5e, so that functionality may differ, but in this case, you could do stuff like that. That would be taking it to the next level or adding more work. So you got to be careful what you wish for, because you could add a whole bunch of work to yourself. This is just kind of showing you the power of the AI tool, essentially, because what I've done here is in a short order. I want to say to prompt all this stuff, it took me less than a half an hour. And it's going to take me less than a half an hour to build the content for this barkeeper, the menu, and even a list of notable figures. So there's some, so basically some tavern patrons. So maybe I want to go to the story entries under world and start building some of the assets for the tavern itself. I don't have a map yet or anything, but I do have a list of patrons. So again, I'll use the drop-down group, go to the add category, edit, and we'll say this is the rusty tankard. And we can use this later to make a book out of it. The rusty tankard. But for now, I'm just going to use story entries until I get everything, or most everything, dealt with. So here's the rusty tankard. I'm going to just add, let's see, we want an advanced story item in this case. That way you can put pictures in there and stuff. And we're going to put a text block for now. Actually, a header block. And I'll say the rusty tankard. And then this is going to be the same thing. but you might have it numbered. So maybe A1 or something like that, right? If it's on a map. And then what you can do is you can take this information that I just copied from ChatGPT. Oops, I don't want to do that. Actually, that's fine. And now I will grab the list of patrons and hit Control V. And this is basically the information on the, we'll say patrons. And then this is going to be a header. And then again, I'm going to right click and get rid of all the extra spaces if I don't want. So there's patrons, staffers, rabble rousers, and drunks, and just the normal one. So this is just to give you some lore as to who might be inside the tavern. And you take this even further and go through each one of these and ask ChatGPT to make the NPCs for each one of these individuals. So let's see what happens. So I'm going to prompt ChatGPT in the window. So it already kind of knows the formatting of the NPC stat blocks. It already has some context as to what we're talking about because I've done some other prompting that's related. And it has the names and the personalities of the NPCs. So what I'm going to say is create each tavern NPC stat block using the context above for the formatting and layout, because that's important for importing content. So create each tavern and NPC stat block. And I'm going to be more specific. I'm going to say 2024 5E stat block, because sometimes it will just do what it wants. And I'm giving it a prompt that says, hey, use the stuff we talked about before. Tavern patron, except for the barkeeper. We'll see. And I'll say create 3 at a time to help prevent memory. Basically, the context of how long your response is does make a difference. There is a ceiling or a cap. So if you have a really big prompt and you're expecting a really big output, it might cut off. So you have to kind of get used, depending on what generative AI tool you are using, but generally you want to keep it kind of low. So I'm asking it to do 3 at a time. If you do any more than that, it's going to break it. So we got 1, 2, 3 here for patrons. We got 1, 2, 3 rabble rousers and drunks, and we have 4 staffers. So let's see what it does. Now it doesn't always do this perfectly, but the big thing is to have it. Yeah, see, it's doing this stuff here, which I didn't want it to do. I don't know why it's doing that, but I'm gonna see, now I can ask it to make the rest, but I don't like the formatting that it did here. It looks really, this is not what I asked for. So I want to say fix the stat blocks to use the text formatting like the barkeeper above. Let's see if it can handle that. Yeah, so it fixed it, sort of. Let's see, mod save. No, that's not quite right. So it will not always be perfect. You got to kind of goad it into doing the right thing sometimes. So I want to go back and use the last stat block that I made because this is actually the correct format. And I'm going to copy and paste that back in. I'm going to say, use this format. So you will run into this. I'll say, use the format above. Hopefully it'll get it. So sometimes you have to kind of cajole it and tell it to do the right thing. There we go. So now it's starting to make those. So this case, it made Old Marn the storyteller. It has all the stats, skills, languages, traits, all that stuff is here. So this is really cool. So it made Ralva the Silent, and she's a dwarven, kind of like a warrior type. I'll say create the next 3 patrons in the same manner. So once you get the chat GPT or whatever you're using to understand the formatting and the layout of the text, it'll go a lot smoother. It just takes it a bit to kind of get the context of what you're trying to ask it. If you give it a template, it will, or like the way you want the text to be laid out, it'll do it. It's just, you kind of have to understand what the text should look like. That's really the biggest part. And the only way to really do that is to look at other stat blocks from official sources. So like if you're on D&D Beyond, you'll get a pretty good formatting, but you got to use the proper filter on the bottom to import those. So once the monster manual comes out, you'll have a better idea of what the stat blocks are going to look like. You can copy and paste those into the import tool, and that'll help with that. So anyhow, this just made, like, I'll say do the next 4 patrons, please. I think the max I would do is 4 NPCs, depending on how complex they are. If they were spellcasters, I might do like 2. So there is a token length in which after a while it runs out of characters in memory. So you have to kind of be careful how much you're asking for. It's not going to be the end of the day. You can just have it break it up, but just kind of as through experience, there is a context length. Even though that's increased quite a bit since I started doing this about a year and a half ago, things have changed. They've really come a long ways as to the capability, the reasoning, the length of and the complexity of what you're asking for. But there's still limitations. It can't do everything. And honestly, I don't want it to do everything. There's some things I want to do myself. So, it's kind of up to you how much you want to rely on it. So this is just kind of an idea of what you can do. And then if you were going to put these in Fantasy Grounds, again, for these NPCs, you can pull up the import tool, select the correct filter, and just put them all in really short order, especially if the text is formatted correctly. It would really help. So when you have stat block, like it'll say medium humanoid, in parentheses human, and then comma neutral. That's what you want. This is the formatting for the 2024 rule set. So it might slightly vary if you're going to use a different legacy stat block. They're a little bit different, especially when it comes to the stats here, because this is a little bit different. The older stat blocks had all the stuff listed in one line and then all the headers above that. So there's some differences, and then this stuff is a little different. They've added traits and switched out all the actions to the actions tab. So there's little minor differences, but once you understand those differences and start looking at these things, it just kind of becomes second nature. It's hard to explain verbally. You just have to do it, and there's no quick and easy way. You just have to learn it. And I think I've been doing this for several months, so I make it look easy. But when you're actually doing this, and if you don't have a good template to start with, it's going to piss you off. I'm just going to let you know. And you're just going to end up making it from scratch anyways. But once you get the formatting down, all that stuff, then it helps. If you need a kind of a template or an idea, hit me up on Discord. We're at the Fantasy Grounds Academy. The links will be at near the bottom. Also, we have tools in our Discord for this kind of stuff, like a kind of a read-only channel that links to this, because I made a custom reference for 2024 rules reference and content creator. And I put this link in our community, and you can ask for a stat block in here and it'll generate it. This does rely on having a subscription, so if you don't pay for it, it'll be limited as to what it will do, and also the context. There's some limitations to it. Just like, I don't know if you'll be able to. I think you can do images now, but anyways, this is a paid subscription in ChatGPT. I paid $20 a month, so if that's not something you like, I'm sorry, I don't know what else to tell you, but this is just a way to speed things up. That's really what I wanted to show. And then the power of the AI generative tools is pretty interesting, because you can generate images, you can make tables, charts, all kinds of stuff. So sky's the limit, but there are some limitations to generative AI tools. They're not perfect. They're actually being deemed dangerous, and people are pissed off about it. But if you're not worried about that too much and kind of using it for your personal use, should be okay. But once you start selling stuff and doing Kickstarters and selling stuff on the DM's Guild or Fantasy Grounds store, make sure you pay attention to the laws. I don't think Smiteworks will deny you if you use AI tools, but what I think will happen is if you don't say or mention that you're using AI in the tools, I believe that's a thing. At least mention that you've used AI or something like that. But nonetheless, just be careful if you're going to go commercial with it. The other thing is that you got to practice. There's no easy button. This stuff does take a little time to digest. So I put in a good solid year, and that's a long time, to kind of understand prompting. That's a whole nother thing that maybe I'll do that someday, just do all prompting. But that is a whole nother science in itself when it comes to specific prompting styles for specific content for specific AI tools, because they're all a little different. I used Anthropic's AI tool for writing, for creative writing, because it does a really good job of being less robotic, less chat GPT like. I use Google LM Notebook for organizing campaign data. So once you've generated everything, it's a really good tool to organize and also research. And then I've used like Gemini and some of the other ones for images or other things. So they all work pretty well. But I think that I have the templates kind of set up around ChatGPT. And I think the templates are probably your biggest advantage if you're not sure how to prompt. So you want to give your AI tool a decent amount of text and context, but not too much. If you give it too much, it confuses it. It's better to do it in bite sizes. And if you're going to do a huge book or a bunch of content, probably want to do it in chunks. You don't want to do it all in the same conversation. It's just it'll lose its memory after a while, and it'll stop. It'll forget the oldest stuff, and it'll just piss you off. So do it in bite sizes. So if you're going to do a really detailed campaign, do the intro, do chapter 1, chapter 2. I do it in sections, and then you can list the names of things in there, but don't actually elaborate on them. And then go in and do all those. So like do all your NPCs together, do all of your tables together, do all of your writing together, so that way it's still valid, but it won't run out of context memory. It won't hallucinate as much, which is where it starts making up stuff that don't make sense. That sort of thing is actually better than it used to be. It used to be horrible. You used to only be able to get by with making maybe 10 paragraphs, and then after a while it just started doing some weird randomness. So it's not as bad as it used to be, but it is still limited. So you got to kind of take that with a grain of salt. This is just a tool. This is not the gospel, and not everything in here is going to be a good fit for you. I get that. So, if any of this stuff pisses you off, I understand. It took me months to get a grip on how to do this stuff effectively and to make it easier for me to create content for my games. That's really all I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to sell stuff right now. I'm not trying to, push AI on anyone. I just want you guys to see it's another tool in your toolbox if you need some quick NPCs or tables, or if you need some ideas for storytelling. This works well for that. I think ChatGPT works well as a brainstorming tool and as an all-in-one, but I think there's other things out there that are more focused and better at different types of tasks, depending on what you're doing. So I'm going to let you guys go. I actually have a party to go to tonight with my wife. I haven't been making a whole lot of content lately because I've been working. I got a new job, that thanks to God for that. And I wanted to also mention that our community engagement has been a little bit lower in the last couple of years. So that's generally been because of the OGL mess, post-COVID, where people are going back to work and going outside again and playing in person. And then just the general overall community attitude, all the outside things going on. I think that's changed the attitude of our community as a whole. So we'll see what happens in the future. Hopefully some more positives. And I think when the new monster manual comes out, I'll do a little look through on there, play around with the stat blocks, maybe test some of the new monsters out that they're releasing, and probably skip over the controversy. There's a whole bunch of stuff I've been looking at lately that talks about, oh, they left the orcs out of the book. I don't care. I can make my own orcs with this. I get why people are pissed or why people don't want them in there, but they became a player race, but there's people that are fighting, oh, they should have left it in there, and they took out half orcs and half elves, and it's just all that kind of stuff. I don't let that bother me. I can make my own. If I want a half elf, I'll put it in there. I don't need Wizards of the Coast or whatever publisher to tell me what I need and what I don't need. So anyhow, folks, take care. Have a good one. Enjoy your weekend. And I'll see you around next time. Bye-bye.